Sunday, December 3rd.
I was up before dawn today, waiting for the news, the bad news. I was standing on the sidewalk when a white van with squeaky brakes drove up. A thin arm reached out of the passenger side window and tossed the Sunday edition of the Tangerine Times onto the driveway. It was oversized and heavy, and double wrapped in a plastic bag. The same thing was happening all over Lake Windsor Downs. The same thing was happening at all the other developments. The white vans were pulling up, and these fat plastic bags were flying out of the windows, bursting like water balloons in the homes of the football fans of Lake Windsor High School. It sure was a mess. Our phone started ringing at 7 a.m. Dad answered it upstairs and heard the bad news from another football father. I don't even know which one. I was already down in the great room reading all about it. The story filled the bottom right-hand corner of the front page. It took up 2 columns there and was continued on page 10. The headline said, "Lake Windsor athlete confesses in football scandal." There was a photo of Antoine Thomas leaving the Tangerine County Municipal Building with the caption,
Star quarterback Antoine Thomas leaves emergency meeting of the Tangerine County Sports Commission.
The front page was just the tip of the iceberg. The article continued inside, with photos, charts, and quotations spread across all of pages 10 and 11. There were photos of Antoine, Coach Warner, and the 3 members of the Tangerine County Sports Commission. There was a chart showing the territorial boundaries of Lake Windsor High School and Tangerine High School, and another chart showing the Lake Windsor football records before and after the arrival of Antoine Thomas. The quotes were from Coach Warner and Mr. Bridges. They were both shocked by the news, neither admitting to knowing anything about anything. The article itself began, "The Tangerine County Sports Commission, meeting in emergency session last night, voted to nullify all victories by the Lake Windsor High School football team over the last 3 seasons. This drastic action was taken in response to a confession made by Lake Windsor quarterback Antoine Thomas to the commission members. In a signed statement, Thomas confessed to lying about his eligibility to attend Lake Windsor High School." The article quoted a commission member as saying that Antoine had contacted them, had met with them, and had presented them with a notarized statement. The same member said they had no choice but to uphold the regulations of the commission and to nullify all of the victories in which Mr. Thomas was involved. I couldn't believe what I was reading. I had thought that maybe Lake Windsor would get fined, or they would have to forfeit their last victory against Tangerine High, but not this. I never even suspected that the commission had such power. It was like they were rewriting history. Lake Windsor had a 7-3 record in Antoine's first season. They were 9-1 the next season and 10-0 this season. That's a total of 26 wins and 4 losses. Now, they're 0-30. 0 wins and 30 losses over the last 3 seasons. And if that's not bizarre enough, every record that they set with Antoine on the team has been nullified too. There was a boxed list of those. Most of the records belonged to Antoine Thomas, but Eric Fisher was in there for the longest field goal, the highest field goal percentage in a season, and the most extra points in a season. Not anymore. They're all nullified. There was another article that focused on a guy who lives in Tangerine, on the same street as Antoine Thomas. He's a black guy, about 25 years old, who had played football at Tangerine High and then at Florida A&M. This is part of what he said. "Everybody knows how it is. If you want that big-time football dream, that Heisman Trophy thing, you get out of Tangerine. No big-time scouts ever come here, ever. So you get yourself an address in Lake Windsor. You have your mail sent there, but you continue to live here. You live a lie. Everybody knows what's happening. Nobody asks any questions. But now Antoine is the one standing up saying that it's all a lie. So people have to listen." I had finished reading all of the articles in the front section by the time Dad walked into the great room. He still had the phone in his hand, and he had forgotten to turn it off. I could tell by his face that he had already been told the basic facts. I handed over the front section without comment and looked to see what there was in the sports section. Dad sat down in a heap on the floor. He finally turned off the phone and he started to read, but the phone rang again immediately. He listened, impatiently, then said,
I have no idea. I haven't even had a chance to read the paper yet.
He hung up again and held the paper in front of him with both hands, like he was grabbing some guy by his lapels. I left him alone and examined the front page of the sports section. The left side had a column written by Mr. Donnelly, with the strange title, Thoughts on an Imaginary Porcelain Plate. I almost didn't read it, thinking he had written the column before all this Antoine Thomas stuff had happened. But I was wrong. Here's the entire column. Not too many people know this. For 20 years, I held the Tangerine County record for the most passing yards in a single game. How I got that record had as much to do with the weather conditions as it did with my talent as a quarterback. But I didn't care. That record was mine, and I was proud of it. On the night when I set my record, Tangerine High was playing Sewanee High during a violent thunderstorm. By all rights, that game should have been called off, but no one in authority had enough sense to do that. As the lightning flashed and the thunder cracked, I, the unsung quarterback of the unsung team, rose up out of the mud not once, but twice to achieve football immortality. Twice we were pinned on our own 5-yard line, and twice I dropped back, slipping and sliding and heaved the ball. Twice the receiver ran under that heave and kept on running, 95 yards into the end zone. In 2 plays I had passed for 190 yards. In the rest of the game I would pass for only 37 more, but the damage had been done. The old record had been shattered. The new record was mine. I went into the record book this way. Most passing yards in a single game, 227, William F. Donnelly, Tangerine High. I have actually seen this record book as meetings of the Tangerine County Sports Commission. It's an old red book, and yes, I have looked up my name. That name, written by hand in a fat old book, is it. It's all you get. There's no trophy, no plaque, no certificate, no plate. You get that one handwritten line plus the knowledge inside of you that you hold the record. Well, that wasn't enough for me. I needed something more splendid, something that I could picture in my mind. So whenever I thought about the record, which was often, I imagined a fine porcelain plate. It was a large white plate, encircled with 14-karat gold edging. A plate that you would display proudly on the back wall of a trophy case. A plate that gleamed at visitors and invited comment. But it was also a fragile plate. One that would only last until fate smiled on some other quarterback rising up out from some other mud puddle. Miraculously, my plate hung intact for 20 years. When it was broken, when my record finally fell, it had nothing to do with a lucky heave or a slippery surface. Antoine Thomas of Lake Windsor High School broke my record midway through his sophomore season. He broke it on a sunny Saturday up at Lake Windsor High, playing against my old school. In that game, he threw for 250 yards and 5 touchdowns. But that was just the beginning. Antoine Thomas would break my record 6 more times. Actually, after the first time, he was breaking his own records. He would go on to rewrite that old red record book in dozens of single game, single season, and career categories, becoming the most dominant player of his or any other generation. Now all that has changed. The Tangerine County Sports Commission has ruled that Antoine Thomas was not legally eligible to play for Lake Windsor High School. Therefore, the records that he broke were not legally broken. Do you realize what this means? The Tangerine County Sports Commission has gathered up the shards of my porcelain plate, crazy glued them together, and handed it back to me. I'm looking at it right now. I guess they meant well, but they did a lousy job. I can see the cracks, like the lines of age on a face. I can see the globs of glue, like tears that will not fall. I can see chips and missing flakes in the gold edging where the circle had been broken. Thanks, Tangerine County Sports Commission, but no thanks. I'm not putting this thing back in my trophy case. I wouldn't even put this thing out in a garage sale. This is nothing to be proud of. Antoine Thomas holds the record for the most passing yards in a single game. Antoine Thomas is the greatest quarterback in the history of Tangerine County. Everybody knows that. I was glad that Mr. Donnelly had put in one good word for Antoine, because it was clear that no one else was going to. The phone kept ringing. A strategy was emerging from the calls that Dad received and made. They were going to blame Antoine, and Antoine alone. The families, the coaches, the teachers, the fans were all denying that they even dimly suspected that anyone was breaking any rule at any time. Give me a break. After I heard Dad telling an assistant coach that he too was shocked by the news, I couldn't take it anymore. I said, Dad, have you ever seen any of the Lake Windsor High football guys out running? He looked as if he was surprised that I was there. What? Have you ever seen any of the Lake Windsor High football guys out running, like along the roads? Yeah, sure. Why? Have you ever seen them riding 10 speeds or shooting hoops or playing tennis? Yeah. Have you ever seen them driving their cars? Yes. Okay. Now, have you ever seen Antoine Thomas doing any of those things? Have you ever seen Antoine out running or biking or driving anywhere around here? Dad looked at me curiously, but he still didn't get it. He answered, No, I can't say I have. Have you seen him at the supermarket? Or at the pump at the gas station? Or getting some fries at McD's? Dad was nodding his head now, but he wasn't agreeing with me. He was getting annoyed. What is this about? I guess it's about your eyesight, Dad. Your eyesight and Coach Warner's and Mr. Bridges and everybody else is shocked today. Because I've seen lots of those Lake Windsor guys in lots of places, everywhere we go, in fact, but I've never seen Antoine Thomas. I've never seen him anywhere except at the football stadium. That's because he doesn't live around here, Dad. He lives in Tangerine. Everybody knows that. Dad looked down. He knew that I was right. He knew the truth. The phone rang again, but he didn't answer. Sunday, December 3rd. Later. With everything else fighting for room in my head, I must confess that Mom and Dad's important meeting didn't seem very important to me. That's why it took me by surprise. As I came downstairs, I heard Mom's voice, tense and upset. I want this thing to be over with, completely finished, everyone gone by the time my parents get here. Dad was just as tense. What? And you think I don't? I don't want them butting in on this. They were setting up the great room, setting it up as if for a homeowners meeting. They arranged 10 chairs facing the fireplace for the guests, and another 10 chairs off to the side by the kitchen. These chairs, as it turned out, were for the families, 2 families, the Fishers and the Bowers. As the guests arrived, they were handed sheets of paper by Dad. I took one for myself and read it. It was a list of items. Items that had been stolen from houses in Lake Windsor Downs, as compiled by the Tangerine County Sheriff's Department. There were notations like Rolex watch, 900, recovered, and pearls, antique, 500, not recovered. By 1 o'clock, all of the guests had been seated. I knew who most of them were. They were from Joey's Street, the street where all of the houses had been tented. That's what they all had in common. The white two-door, the gray Lancaster, the yellow Stewart. Today, they were all the same. Today, they were all the blue tents. The chairs off to the side were occupied by Mom, Dad, Arthur Bauer, Sr., Mrs. Bauer, who I had never seen before, and Paige Bauer. Arthur Bauer Sr. looked angry. The rest of them looked sick at heart. Arthur Bauer Jr. had joined Eric out on the patio, where the 2 of them were slouching silently. Mom and Dad had set out a pair of chairs for them next to their families, but they weren't sitting in them. I wasn't sitting in my family chair either. I chose a place on the couch, next to the coffee table. Mom stood up to open the meeting, but before she spoke, she turned and looked outside at Eric. Then she walked into the kitchen, opened the patio door, and said in a trembling voice, Eric, would you come in here, please? Neither Eric nor Arthur moved. Mom waited them out, in front of everyone. Silence filled the great room like an embarrassing smell. Finally, Mom repeated, Eric, would you come in here, please? Arthur Bauer Sr. leaned around the corner and barked, Arthur, get in here! First, Arthur. Then Eric staggered to their feet and moved slowly inside to the empty chairs next to their families. When they sat down, there was a low gasp as the guests looked upon their horrible faces. Eric's nose was blood red and swollen. His eyes were mere slits and rimmed with black like a raccoon's. Believe it or not, Arthur looked worse. Arthur's face was covered with purple bumps and red cuts. His lips were cracked and swollen too. He looked out of place among humans, like an ogre in a storybook. Mom picked up her notebook, opened it, and started to speak in an even, formal voice. On behalf of the Bauer family and the Fisher family, I want to thank you for coming. It is my duty to inform all of you of the following. She looked down at her notes and read, On November 22nd, I made a shocking discovery. While out at our storage bin searching for boxes of winter clothing, I found a gym bag that did not belong there. When I opened this gym bag, I found a U.S. Army gas mask, a pair of rubber gloves, and a plastic supermarket bag filled with diamond earrings, watches, gold rings, and many other types of precious jewelry. This time there was a loud gasp from the audience, including me. That afternoon, I spoke with Sergeant Edwards of the Tangerine County Sheriff's Department. You probably know his name. Sergeant Edwards confirmed that the items in the gym bag matched the description of the items that were stolen from your homes while they were tinted. Mom closed the notebook and made eye contact with the guests. It didn't take a genius to figure out the rest. These items were stolen by Eric Fisher and Arthur Bauer. They have admitted as much. They have had no choice but to admit it. Arthur used the gas mask to enter the tinted homes. Then he stole items from those homes while Eric kept watch outside. She pulled out a copy of the sheet that each guest had been given. We have recovered some of the items already. My husband will tell you more about that. Eric and Arthur gave some of your things away, and we are working on getting them back. Mom nodded at Paige. Paige Bauer has already returned the items that were given to her. Her friend Tina Territon, who agreed to come here today but who obviously has not shown up, has already returned what was given to her. They have also provided us with names of other Lake Windsor High School students who received stolen items from Eric and Arthur. We have contacted the parents of all those students and are confident that we will be able to get back those stolen items. Mom stared blankly at the guests for a minute, then said, My husband has more to say to you. Dad stood up as Mom sat down. He picked up where she left off.
That's right. Sergeant Edwards is the Tangerine County officer in charge of all your cases. He has allowed us, and by us, I mean the Fishers and the Bowers, to approach all of you with a plan to make restitution. That is, Eric and Arthur will make full restitution to all of you for all of your stolen property. If any item cannot be recovered and returned, Mr. Bauer and I will guarantee its full value to you in cash. Dad held up his copy of the list of stolen items. You can see what we have already recovered. Those items could be released to you as early as tomorrow. If we can get all of you to agree to this restitution plan, and it has to be a unanimous agreement, then the Sheriff's Department will not pursue further charges against Eric and Arthur.
I felt sorry for Dad at that moment. He just couldn't give up. He had too much invested in the Eric Fisher football dream, and he just couldn't give up. I wanted to say, Look at Eric's face, Dad. That's what he really looks like. But I kept quiet. The phone rang, so I leaned over the coffee table and grabbed the portable. It was Joey, and he was practically screaming into the receiver. The sheriff's deputies are at Arthur Bauer's house. They're sitting at the car out front.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. They stopped me on my bike. They asked me if I knew where he was. I know where he is. Yeah? Where? He's right here. Whoa, can I tell him? Yeah, why not? Joey slammed down the phone. Arthur Bauer Sr. was speaking now. He was angry. I've talked to my son about this. He has admitted his wrongdoing. He has said he's sorry, and he has made full disclosure of the facts. The question today is, do you want to prosecute these two dumb kids and possibly ruin their lives? Or do you want them to make full restitution to you, like men, and get on with their lives? Do you want to give them a second chance or not? I searched the faces of the people from the blue tents. Their jaws were set. Their eyes were focused on the ugly faces of Eric and Arthur. The blue tents clearly felt no pity for those two thieves sitting in their chairs, staring at the floor, voiceless, useless, lifeless, like a pair of mannequins in a dumpster. One man spoke up against Mr. Bauer. He said, Don't go blaming me for ruining your kid's life. I didn't ask your kid to break into my house. Mr. Bauer answered coldly, No, of course you didn't. The man turned to the others and continued, Why should they escape all punishment for their crimes? That's not justice. What if the cops had nabbed 2 kids from Tangerine for robbing our houses? They'd be in jail now. Mr. Bauer waved the list at him. Yeah, and you'd never see your property again. If this gets into the court system, you might never get your things back. The man shouted, What is this, blackmail? If I don't agree, I don't get my stuff back? He looked at the others. We're getting robbed all over again. Mr. Bauer was furious but controlled. Yeah? Well, maybe you're the one person in the world who never did anything wrong in his life. Maybe you were born perfect. Maybe you were never a dumb kid once. The man didn't back down. I'll tell you what I never did. I never broke into an old lady's bedroom and ransacked through her underwear drawer and stole her pearl necklace that was handed down to her by her own grandmother and then gave it to my girlfriend like I was a big man or something. I never did that, and I don't know anybody else who did either. Your kid and that other kid are in a class all by themselves. Mr. Bauer didn't reply. He was so angry that he walked back to his seat and sat down, leaving no speaker at all in front of the meeting. Dad got up again, looked at them all, and asked simply, Do you accept our plan for making restitution or not? What choice did they have? In the end, the Blue Tent people accepted the plan, reluctantly. They agreed, reluctantly, to give Eric and Arthur that second chance. The second chance you get when your parents can guarantee full restitution. The second chance you get when you can kick a 50-yard field goal. The meeting broke up quickly. Mr. Bauer led his family directly to the door. The other guests started to file out, solemnly, silently, but then they stopped in their tracks. Something was blocking their passage. I hurried over to the side window and looked out. The first thing that I saw was Joey. He was straddling his bike out on the sidewalk. He was squinting in the sun. I looked to his left, and there they were. 2 sheriff's deputies, one thin with blonde hair, and the other big and muscular, with a black mustache. Joey pointed out Arthur Bauer, and the 2 deputies started toward him. Arthur and his father stopped still, right in front of my window, while the rest of the guests and the families squeezed out onto the driveway. The big deputy asked, Are you Arthur Bauer? Arthur nodded meekly. The deputy said, Extend both hands, please, Mr. Bauer. Arthur did, and the deputy calmly clicked a pair of handcuffs onto his wrists. His partner circled Arthur and started to pat him down, looking for a weapon. I hurried to the door and pushed my way through. The big deputy was reading Arthur his rights. Arthur Bauer, you are under arrest in connection with the murder of Louise Cruz. You have the right to remain silent. Arthur's father was paralyzed, in a state of shock, but when he heard the charge, he yelled out, Wait a minute! Arthur, is that the guy you told me about, the guy at football practice? Arthur, terrified, nodded his head rapidly. His father continued, Listen, officer, this is not right. This is a mistake. Arthur told me all about this guy back when this first happened. The deputy, whose name tag said Sergeant Rojas, started walking with his prisoner, not listening. Arthur told me about a guy who showed up at a football practice looking for a fight. He didn't belong up there. He was just looking for trouble. Am I right, Arthur? Arthur continued to nod. He came up to Arthur and took a swing at him, so Arthur hit him back 1 time. Am I right? Arthur nodded. And that was the end of it. The guy came up there looking for a fight, and he found one. The guy didn't even belong up there. I couldn't listen to any more of this. I shouted, He belonged up there. Arthur's father turned to see who had said this. I went on, He belonged up there as much as you and your stupid kids do. I looked at the blonde deputy. That weapon he used to kill Louise Cruz was a blackjack. This made Sergeant Rojas stop in front of the open door of the police cruiser. He turned and stared at me. So I added, It's probably still in his Land Cruiser back at his house. It was there on Friday night anyway. Sergeant Rojas told the blonde guy, Get on over there and guard that vehicle until I get back. The blonde deputy took off running. Sergeant Rojas turned back to me. What else did you see? I stood up straight and faced them all, like I had seen Louise do. I heard Eric Fisher tell him to do it. The heads in the crowd all turned together toward Eric. Sergeant Rojas pointed one finger at him and ordered, You, get over here. Eric shuffled forward like he was already wearing leg irons. The sergeant demanded, Is that true? Eric looked at Dad. Dad repeated the words, Is that true? Eric hesitated for just a moment, then started to nod. At Dad, at the sergeant, at everyone in the crowd, steadily, up and down, he nodded to us all. Sergeant Rojas instructed Dad.
You keep this young man in the house. Not in the neighborhood, not in the yard, in the house. I may call or come back at any time, and I expect him to be here.
Dad whispered that he understood. The sergeant turned his attention back to me.
Do we have your statement, son?
No, sir. Then I felt compelled to add, I wasn't brave enough to give my statement. He eyeballed me.
Are you willing to give a statement now, if called upon?
Yes, sir. He put one hand on Arthur's head and pushed him down into the seat of the back of the cruiser. The rest of the Bowers hurried into their car to follow. I stood there with Joey and watched them pull away. The people from the meeting drifted off toward their homes, shaking their heads and talking. Joey held out his fist, and I banged my fist down on it. He said, I'm gonna hustle over to Bowers and see what the deputy does. Okay, I'll talk to you later. Once Joey rode away, we found ourselves alone. Mom, Dad, Eric, and me. We walked together back up the driveway and into the garage. Eric stopped by the door, turned, and looked at me through his swollen eyes. I looked back through my thick lenses. He seemed to be struggling with something. Maybe a memory. Maybe he was reliving a scene from long ago. The four of us remained posed there, like we were frozen in time. Four frozen figures from the Wonders of the World exhibit. Mom finally broke the spell when she whispered to herself, Oh no, not now. We all turned to see Grandmom and Grandpa walking up the driveway. Mom whispered again, What are we going to tell them? I knew the answer to that. We're going to tell them something bad, Mom. Grandmom and Grandpop stopped at the top of the incline, framed in the rectangular opening. Grandmom said, Caroline, have we come at a bad time? Mom shook her head. No, you're right on time. You're here right when you said you'd be.
Grandpop looked hard at Eric. He asked him, What the hell happened to your eyes?
Eric answered him in a surprisingly strong voice. I got kicked in the face, Grandpop. Some kid kicked me in the face. Grandpop glanced over at me and then back at Eric. He gave him a short nod, like he understood. Eric said, Excuse me. Then he opened the door and disappeared inside. Dad gestured to Grandmom and Grandpop to come in too. They exchanged a worried look and then started forward. Mom and Dad led us into the kitchen and sat at the round table. Grandmom and Grandpop looked me up and down. Then Grandmom asked her usual question. How are you, Paul? All right, I'm all right. Grandpop clapped me on the shoulder. That's good. I dragged over a stool from the counter so the five of us could sit around the table. Eric wasn't anywhere to be seen. I figured he'd gone upstairs to his room. Mom and Dad took turns talking, just as they had at the meeting. Grandmom and Grandpop didn't seem surprised by any of what they heard. They took it all in without even blinking. When it was over, when we had told them every bad thing there was to tell, we paused and waited. Grandmom put her hand on her heart, sighed deeply, and said, You know what I'm going to tell you, Caroline. Mom closed her eyes. You're paying now for what you didn't do back then. Mom agreed with her completely. I know. But Dad wasn't so quick to surrender. He said curtly, That's easy to say now. It's easy enough, 7 years after the fact, to say I told you so. Grandmom replied flatly, We are not saying that. Grandpop leveled a stare at him. We did tell you so. Eric did need help. He needed a doctor's help. Dad countered with, No, Eric did not need a doctor's help. He did not need drugs. He did not need to be one of those medicated kids who float around all the time like they're underwater. What drugs? We're not talking about drugs. The kid needed to know which end was up, that's all. First off, he needed to get his backside whipped for hurting Paul. Dad looked away. He clearly wanted out of this conversation. I guess we all did, because we all sat for a long minute in silence. Grandpop finally said, Okay, let me be the one to apologize. I don't have all the answers. I'm not saying I do. He said to Mom, We're family, that's all I know. We'll help you any way we can. He said to Grandma, I think the best thing we can do right now is to get down to Orlando and leave him alone. Mom tried half-heartedly to talk them out of it. Dad didn't say a word. He drifted off toward the great room. Mom said, "At least take a tour of the house. That's what you came here for." Grandmom and Grandpop exchanged another look. Grandmom said, "A quick tour." I tagged along behind them on a fast lap around the ground floor. We passed by Dad, sitting in his alcove in front of the IBM. I watched him as Mom pointed out things in the great room. He was sitting in a trance-like state in front of the screen, with the green lights of the Eric Scholarship Offers file washing over his face. Mom described the top floor briefly, but she didn't take them up there. The tour ended in the foyer at the front door. Grandmom said, "It's a lovely house," and stepped outside. Grandpop, however, was not quite finished. He signaled just a minute, climbed the stairs and turned left. He knocked, waited a moment, and then spoke quietly to Eric through the door. Then he came back down to Mom. He told her, "It's a beautiful house, all right. Nothing like those places I made you live in, huh?" Mom looked like she might cry. Grandpop put an arm around her shoulder. "Good luck to you in it, honey. Good luck to you from here on." Then he hurried out to catch up with Grandmom. Mom watched them drive away down the street until the ringing phone pulled her back inside. She picked it up, listened briefly, and answered, "We'll be there." Her eyes drifted over to mine. She spoke in a weary voice, a voice beyond anger, beyond upset. "That was your principal, Dr. Johnson. She wants to see both of us in her office tomorrow morning at 7:30 sharp."
Monday, December 4th.
Mom and I had to leave a half hour earlier today in order to be at Tangerine Middle School by 7:30. I packed my books and my lunch like I was going for a normal day. What did I know? Mom drove tensely, silently, angrily. I can't say that I blame her. In just 1 week, both of her sons had gone from success to failure, from public praise to public shame. I tried to picture Mom in our climate-controlled storage place, finding that gym bag, not recognizing it, wondering whose it was, deciding to open it to find out, staring at the items inside, pulling them out one by one, the awful truth appearing to her gradually, like a slowly developing Polaroid. We pulled up in front of Tangerine Middle at 7:25. Absolutely nothing was happening. None of the karate kickers were on the sidewalk. None of the gangsters were hanging out. None of the buses were pulling into the loop. I had never been there so early before. We walked through the front doors and climbed the stairs to the main office. Dr. Johnson was just inside the glass doors talking to 2 other adults, Thomas Cruz and a woman who I recognized from the soccer games. She looked a little like Victor, so I guess she must be Mrs. Guzman. Dr. Johnson shook hands with my mother, very seriously. She looked at me and said, "Paul, why don't you wait out in the hallway for a few minutes? We'll call you." Dr. Johnson led the adults to her inner office. I drifted back through the glass doors, into the hall. I heard light footsteps on the stairs, so I started watching the second-floor landing. A familiar brown ponytail appeared, then a familiar face. I said, "Teresa, hi." She didn't really look at me. She came to the top of the stairs and said, "So there you are." I said, "Did they call you in too?" "No, not me, just Tino and Victor. They're inside." "They are? I didn't see them." "Yeah, they're in there. Dr. Johnson probably put them in the nurse's room. That's where they usually wait." "Oh? Why are you here?" "Me? I'm always here early, for my job." "Officer aide?" "Yeah, right, that's me." Teresa and I stood together, with our backs to the glass wall of the office. We stood for a whole minute like that, in silence, like 2 strangers waiting for a bus. Then I remembered, and I reached into my backpack. I pulled out the science report, laser printed in 4 colors with a clear plastic binder. I handed it to Teresa. "Here, I was hoping I would run into you. I finished putting together the report. I hope you like it." Teresa took it and studied the title, printed in tall orange letters with black shading. She read it out loud. "The Golden Dawn Tangerine." She leafed through the report, looking at the pie chart for the varieties of citrus grown in Tangerine County and the bar graph for the decline of citrus acreage in Tangerine County. She whispered, "This is beautiful. This is an A+ for sure." Teresa looked me in the eye and smiled, but not for long. Suddenly, like they had sprung a leak, Her eyes filled up with big tears that rolled down her cheeks. She shook her head from side to side and demanded to know, "Why did you do this?" "What? Do what?" "All of it." She held up her report. "All of this, all of it. Why did you come to my school and come to my house to work and jump on some coach? Are you crazy? You messed up your whole life. Do you know that?" I had never seen Teresa angry or upset. Now she was both. I tried to calm her down, but she went on. "Listen, you're not one of these guys. Do you understand that? You're not one of these guys who are sitting in the office all the time waiting to get punished. You don't even belong here. You don't live in Tangerine. You live in Lake Windsor Downs. And you're going to have to keep on living there. You're going to have to go to that high school. You're going to have to face that coach and everybody else who is in that gym. Tino and Victor don't have to do any of that. Tino and Victor are going to walk away from all of this." She looked away, shaking her head at my absolute stupidity. She took several deep breaths. Then she looked back at me and repeated calmly, "So why did you do it? Why did you jump on that coach?" I raised up my shoulders and let them fall. I've thought about that a lot over the last 3 days. I spend a lot of time thinking about stuff, probably too much. But that night in the gym, I didn't think at all. I just did it. Teresa wiped her cheek on her sleeve. "Yeah? Well, you really messed up. Tino and Victor got caught anyway. They always do." We fell silent again and settled back into our positions against the wall. I tried to lighten the mood. I said, "Maybe this is all your fault. You're the first one I met here. You're the one who took me around." She didn't know if I was kidding or not. She said, "So how's that make it my fault?" "You introduced me to Tino and Victor." "Yeah, well, you said you wanted to play soccer. But you didn't have to do that. You could have let me sink or swim on my own." Now she smiled slightly. "Yeah, I could have let you sink." She pointed to the office. "Dr. Johnson told us that some kids were coming here from Lake Windsor because their school fell down a sinkhole. I don't know. I guess I figured you'd all be looking down your noses at us, and some of the kids were. But not you. You acted like you were happy to be here. You liked it here. Then you said you wanted to play on the soccer team. I don't know. I guess I felt sorry for you. Especially when I thought about what Victor and those guys might do to you." The door to Dr. Johnson's office opened. Teresa and I both looked in that direction. She said, "Whenever Louise talked about you, he called you Paul. I'm gonna start calling you that, too." She took me by the arm. "Come on, Paul." She led me into the office. Dr. Johnson walked out and said, "Teresa, would you go ask Miss Pollard to come up here and to bring Paul Fisher's file with her?" Teresa gave me a silent squeeze on the arm and took off to do the errand. I peered into the inner office. I could see Mom's profile. She was crying. Dr. Johnson said, "Okay, Paul, come with me. You can wait in the nurse's room. We'll be calling you boys in one at a time." She led me down the short hall and opened the door to the nurse's room. Tino and Victor were in there, sitting in black chairs against the white wall. They seemed smaller, younger than I remembered, like little kids. They certainly weren't nervous. I guess they had been in there too many times. Tino continued to stare straight ahead, but Victor popped up in his seat and started in on Dr. Johnson. "Oh no, Dr. Johnson, you're bringing the wrong boy in here now. Fisherman was just sitting up there with his mama and papa. He just fell out of those bleachers like he fainted or something. He's lucky he landed on that dude that broke his fall." He turned to Tino for support. "Fisherman fainted out there in that grove last week, am I right?" Tino ignored him. "Dr. Johnson, he might have a brain tumor making him faint like that. That boy needs an x-ray." Dr. Johnson shook her head and said quietly, "Things are bad enough, Victor. Don't make them worse. Now come along with me." Victor opened his eyes wide and looked at me. Then he got up and followed Dr. Johnson out of the room. I sat down in his chair next to Tino. He surprised me by speaking right away. "When you get in there, don't be running your mouth like that fool Victor. All you say to Dr. Johnson is, 'Yes, ma'am,' 'No, ma'am,' and 'Thank you, ma'am.' Understand? You take your 3-week suspension and you go home." I said, 3 weeks? You figure that's what it'll be?" "Yeah." Tino shifted around in his chair, but he still wasn't looking at me. He went on, "And you can tell Tuna for me that we weren't disrespecting his brother or anything like that. We just had to take care of business." "I think he knows that." Yeah, well, you tell him I said so. Okay. Suddenly, Dr. Johnson opened the door and signaled that it was Tino's turn to follow her. I was left in the nurse's room by myself, staring at the eye chart. It seemed like it was about 2 minutes later when she came back for me. I followed her into the inner office. Mom was sitting in the same spot. Her eyes were red, but she was no longer crying. Dr. Johnson stood behind her desk, held up a thin white booklet called The Student Code, and said, "I've already explained this to your mother, Paul. The school board has set down its policies in this booklet. We are all obliged to follow them. It is my duty to explain to you what violation you committed and what penalty you will receive." She held the booklet out in case I wanted to read it. She explained, "Your violation is called a Level 4 infraction. In this case, assaulting a teacher or other school board employee. This is the most serious level of infraction. The penalty for this and for any other Level 4 infraction is expulsion." Dr. Johnson paused to make sure I understood. I don't think I did. I was thinking to myself, 3 weeks. I'm supposed to get 3 weeks. She continued, "As of today, you are expelled from all Tangerine County public schools for the remainder of this academic year." She paused again and looked at me. I heard myself say, "Yes, ma'am." Dr. Johnson set down the student code booklet and asked, "Do you have any questions about this?" I thought of, "No, ma'am," and "Thank you, ma'am," but I couldn't say them. I was too confused. And I did have questions. I said, "What about Victor and Tino? Are they expelled too?" Dr. Johnson frowned. I could tell that she didn't want to talk about them. She pointed back at the student code and said, "No, Paul, their violation falls under the Level 3 infractions, fighting with another student. The penalty for that is 3 weeks suspension." I nodded. What else could I say but, "Thank you, ma'am"? Dr. Johnson moved toward the door, so Mom got to her feet. Dr. Johnson said, "Your brother has decided to waive your right to appeal. Basically, Paul, you did it. You got caught and you got punished. On the positive side, you have already completed enough days to get credit for this semester. There are options available to you. Your mother has selected the option of enrolling you in a private school to complete the second half of 7th grade." We were all moving out the doors by now, into the main office. Other kids were coming in and out. Dr. Johnson held out her hand, and I shook it. She said, "I wish you well in that option, Paul. Goodbye, Mrs. Fisher." And she was gone, just like that. I guess I had expected more. I guess I had expected a pep talk or a stern speech. But she got rid of me as quickly as she had gotten rid of Victor and Tino. The office was starting to fill up with kids, and Dr. Johnson was needed elsewhere. The day had begun. The students at Tangerine Middle School were doing what they always did. But I was not among them. I was no longer one of them. That realization hit me suddenly, like a smack in the face. I followed Mom down the 2 flights of stairs, keeping my head lowered so that I didn't have to look at anybody. When we got to the front door, I could hear the sounds of the mob of kids outside. The karate kickers had arrived, so had the gangsters. They were all doing what they did every morning, being wild, being loud, until they saw me. Then, in a heartbeat, it all stopped. They all stopped what they were doing to stare at me. Mom and I stood at the top step and stared back at them. She said, "Paul, what do they want?" I could hear mumbling from different areas in the crowd. They were saying stuff like, "That's him," and "That's Fisher." One of the biggest and baddest 8th grade gangsters moved toward us with his boys right behind him. Mom let out a frightened noise and whispered, "What are they doing?" I turned toward her and said, out of the corner of my mouth, "No fear, Mom. Show them no fear." I walked slowly down the steps. Mom stayed where she was. The mob parted slightly, just enough to swallow me up. That big 8th grader held his fist out, and I put mine down on top of it. He said, "All right, Fisher!" Suddenly, they were all on top of me. All these guys I didn't really know. Guys who didn't really know me. They started pounding me on the back, rubbing my hair, shaking both my hands at once. They were all saying stuff like, "Way to be, Fisher! Hang tough! Keep your head up, man!" It was a strange moment for me. Among these big, bad strangers, their words surrounded me and picked me up and moved me along towards the car. I could hear Mom yelling over the top of them, "Paul, are you all right in there?" Mom had worked her way around to the driver's side door and was fumbling with the keys. I opened my door and turned back to the mob. I couldn't think of a thing to say, so I just stuck my thumb in the air.
awkwardly and slipped into my seat. They all turned and headed back to their usual places. Mom quickly locked the doors, and we peeled out. By now, she was more puzzled than scared. She waited until we were safely away to ask, "What was that? What was that all about?" I curled my lip. They know a bad dude when they see one. "Paul, you're not a bad dude." "Oh no?" I jerked my thumb back toward the mob. "Do you see any of those wusses getting expelled? From every public school in Tangerine County?" Mom breathed a loud sigh. "You'd think those would be the worst words a mother could hear." She shook her head back and forth. I didn't know if she was going to laugh or cry. She laughed. "Not in this family." We drove through downtown Tangerine. Mom said, "Well, I'll tell you, I, for one, am glad you're out of that place." She wasn't glad for very long. I informed her. "I'm going back, Mom. Next year. I already talked to the coach about it. And I'm going to make the all-county team." Mom said with certainty, "You can't do that." And then with less certainty, "I don't think you can do that." I quoted Gina's words. "They make exceptions for lots of guys. They're going to make one for me." "We'll have to see about that." "There's nothing to see about. I've made up my mind." Mom shook her head some more, but she didn't seem to be upset. She certainly wasn't crying. Maybe she had gone over the edge. Maybe we both had. For whatever reason, a strange feeling of calm had come over us. We reached Route 89 and turned south. I said, "Wrong way, Mom." "Depends on where you're going." "Where are we going?" "The mall. We're going to buy you some clothes that fit." "Okay." "And some uniforms." "Some what?" "Blue pants, white shirts, blue ties." "You're kidding." "Nope, this is your option." "You're sending me to St. Anthony's?" "That's right. Dr. Johnson called the principal for me. Sister Mary Margaret. She agreed that you could start there on Wednesday, in the 7th grade, on a trial basis." "A trial basis? You mean she wants to find out if I'm too bad a dude to keep there?" "Yes, I guess that's what she means." "You mean that I'll be walking in there with a bad reputation? That kids will fear me?" "I wouldn't go that far." "Well, I would. I know all about fear." I thought about other new schools that I had entered. "Do you realize, Mom, that I've never been anything but a nerd? And now I'm going to enter this nerd school, not as a fellow nerd, but as a feared and notorious outlaw." "It's not a nerd school." "Oh, yes, it is. I've been there, October 12th. Some of them may remember me from that day. I rode up there with the War Eagles. We laid them to waste, 10-0. There was fear in their eyes, and there will be again when I walk in on Wednesday." "Paul, please, you need to take this option very seriously. Not everybody gets a second chance." I thought, yeah, tell me about it, Mom. We pulled into the mall. Then we went on an enormous shopping spree, unprecedented in my lifetime. Mom was out of control. She let me buy everything that I even thought about wanting. She never said no. She never even hesitated. Bag after bag, store after store, sneakers, jeans, jackets, shirts, socks, underwear. When we got home, I went upstairs with a pair of lawn-sized garbage bags. I dumped out the old clothes from my dresser. Then I pulled out the old clothes from my closet. I filled both bags and went back for 2 more. I put everything into those big green bags and then piled them in the garage for the Goodwill pickup. Then I started to work on my new stuff, pulling out pins, cutting off tags, throwing away paper. Drawer after drawer, hanger after hanger, I filled up my dresser and my closet with new clothes that fit. Tuesday, December 5th. Dad had to take Eric down to the police station this morning to talk to Sergeant Rojas. They were there from 7:30 until 10:30. When they got back, Eric went straight up to his room. Dad came into the kitchen and told Mom and me, "Arthur Bauer's trying to blame Eric. He's saying that Eric put him up to it. Eric denies it. He says Arthur misunderstood him. It's a big mess." He poured himself a cup of coffee and added, "The police will sort it out. It's their job, not mine." I said, "What do the witnesses say?" "I know that Antoine Thomas and Brian Baylor have given statements to the sergeant. They both say that it was Arthur who actually assaulted the guy." "The guy's name was Louise." Dad nodded and corrected himself. "I'm sorry, Louise." I thought about Eric's group of flunkies. I asked, "What about friendly witnesses?" "Eric and Arthur don't have any friends, not since he started rounding up all that stolen jewelry. No, nobody but Arthur Bauer Sr. is saying it was a fair fight."
Mom had her elbows flat on the table and both hands up under her chin, like she was holding her own severed head. She asked, "So what's gonna happen now?" Dad answered calmly, almost casually, as if he didn't have anything to do with him.
Now the wheels of justice will turn. Slowly but surely, each of them will have to answer for whatever it was that he did. I'm not interfering anymore.
I looked back at Mom. She, at least, seemed worried about her firstborn son. Dad, on the other hand, seemed more like those friends who had abandoned Eric, who now regretted ever getting involved with him in the first place. He turned to me.
Paul, Sergeant Rojas wants a statement from you, too. He wants you to type up a paragraph or two describing exactly what you saw and what you heard. You know, what really happened. You can give it to me, and I'll drop it off at the sheriff's department.
I said, "Okay, I can do that." The phone rang in the great room. I walked over to the coffee table and picked it up. I heard a familiar voice.
You gotta get yourself a better lawyer, homeboy.
Tino? Yeah, I guess you're right.
So, what's up? What are you going to be doing with yourself?
I'm starting up at St. Anthony's on Wednesday. Tino snorted with contempt.
St. Anthony's? Those losers? You gotta be kidding me.
Hey, I didn't say I was going to play for them. I'm playing for the War Eagles next year.
Oh, yeah? You don't think you're gonna start, do you?
I know I'm gonna start.
Yeah, well, we'll see about that.
What about you? I asked him. What are you gonna be doing?
Oh, I got lots to do. You know, it's what they call a blessing in disguise. Luis has been advertising the Golden Dawns in all the trade papers. There's a big response, just like he said there would be. He's got orders from growers all over Florida, from Texas, from California, even from down in Mexico. I gotta help our daddy get all those orders filled, and I gotta help him with a lot of other stuff that Luis did too.
Tino paused, then he said awkwardly,
Hey, fisherman, anytime you want to come out and work in the groves, you come on out. You're on the crew, you know what I'm saying?
I knew what he was saying. I answered, yeah, thanks. I want to. That's something I really want to do. You just tell me when.
You know when. Time and temperature, right? When the sun's going down and the wind's coming up and the temperature is 39, 38, 37, you know what's going to happen next, and you know where we'll be.
I'll be there too.
All right.
Maybe I'll even stay awake this time.
Tino snorted again.
There was a pause. Then he said,
Hey, good luck with that. St. Anthony's place. I don't know anything about it, except that we beat their butts every year.
They gotta wear uniforms.
Is that right?
Yeah, and they got nuns teaching there.
No way. Nuns?
Yeah.
All right, well, don't you go getting wild like you do. I don't want to hear about you jumping out of the bleachers on the Pope or anything like that.
No, you won't.
You take care of yourself, brother. I'll see you in the groves.
Yeah, bye. I hung up, but I heard that word brother echoing long afterward. I looked up at the ceiling, and I heard Eric pacing back and forth in the cage that he had made for himself.
Tuesday, December 5th. Later.
I came upstairs after dinner to write out my account of the crime of First Sergeant Rojas. I logged on and went back through my journal entries from Houston until today. Then I started writing. I didn't finish until after 9 p.m. I started with basic facts, a paragraph or two, but I couldn't stop there. I had too much to say. I started writing about Luis, and what he meant to the people around him, and how they depended on him, and why they looked up to him. Then I tried to write the same thing about Eric. What did he mean to the people around him? How did they depend on him? Why did they look up to him? I don't suppose the police are interested in all of that. That's not their job. But it's a part of the truth, a big part. And as Antoine Thomas told me, the truth shall set you free. I went downstairs, handed the disc to Mom and Dad, and said, here's the whole truth. Here's what really happened. I went into the kitchen and poured myself a glass of orange juice. When I walked back through the great room, Mom and Dad had both pulled up chairs in the alcove. They were both staring hard at the computer screen.
Wednesday, December 6th.
The first day of school, take 3. I got into my blue pants, white shirt, blue tie, black socks, and black shoes and went down to the kitchen. Neither Mom nor Dad mentioned my disc over breakfast, but I was surprised to hear Mom say, "Paul, we've talked about it, and we've decided that your father will drive you to St. Anthony's today." At 7:30, Dad and I walked out into the cold Florida morning. A light wind was blowing to the west, carrying the muck fire away from us, toward the Gulf. To the east, the sun was rising behind a long row of gray clouds. I stopped to look at them, jagged and red-peaked, looming there like a distant mountain range. We pulled out of the development and headed north, past the gates and guardhouses, past the high-tension wires and the osprey nests, toward the Lake Windsor campus. When we stopped at the light at Route 89 in Siegel Way, Dad pointed over to the right. He said,
"Do you see that? That's Mike Costello's tree."
I looked where Dad was pointing and saw it, the big laurel oak. It had been planted on the front lawn of the high school, between the road and the bus lanes. It looked healthy enough, strong enough, but it was bound and crisscross of wires attached to white metal snakes. Dad added,
"Those stakes are just temporary, until it can stand on its own."
We drove on to the next light and turned right. We headed east, toward the glowing colors of the mountain range, and toward the glowing colors of the citrus groves. I thought to myself, Mike Costello has a tree, and that's good. But Luis has his tree too, and he will have many, many more. Soon the road narrowed to 2 lanes, and we were surrounded by the groves, surrounded by the beauty of it all. I stared through the window at the endless rows of trees, orange, tangerine, lemon, flying past us on either side. I rolled down the window and let it all in. The air was clear and cold, and the car immediately filled up with that scent, the scent of a golden dawn.